claim that it does not impact free speech in America, but it does.
So this is a form of affirmative action.
Absolutely,
being
it's
imposed
forced
on talk
affirmative
radio.
action.
All right.
Forced affirmative action.
Let me ask you, what would the new fairness doctrine, in the forms that you're talking about, apply to national public radio?
Of course
which
not.
Which is taxpayer-funded and quite liberal, as we know.
Yes, yes.
So NPR is exempt from all of this.
Absolutely.
Why?
Well, because it's their own bailiwick. It's their own turf. It would not apply to them. Of course, it would apply to them in the legal sense. They could not pass a law or a regulation that would impact just conservative talk radio without impacting NPR.
So maybe you and I could get a gig on NPR.
I will be there with you shoulder to shoulder, and I will be demanding equal time on every NPR radio station.
Doesn't this just strike you as absolute upside-down Alice in Wonderland craziness, where NPR, which is a government-run entity on talk radio, which is very far to the left, paid for by taxpayer dollars, that they would essentially be protected from this kind of imposition of fairness and whatever other euphemism they want to stifle free speech? Our
dear friend Alan Colmes nailed it. He says we have to be careful for what we ask. And he's absolutely true, because and right, because it would impact national public radio potentially, and all other liberal media potentially. And let's face it, again, they have control over most mainstream media. Their thoughts permeate most mainstream media. So I think that they're on slippery slope here, in thin ice, big time.
Now, you mentioned President Obama, and he's got a little bit of a track record in talking about these issues, and certainly he's a smart politician to the extent that he will put people in place who will do the heavy lifting and the dirty work for him, so he can look like good cop, as opposed to, say, John Podesta or the head of the FCC, who will be the bad cops in these situations. First of all, is there a public statement on the record by President Obama on the fairness doctrine?
Yes, there is. Two times that I am aware of, he says he does not favor the fairness doctrine. However, he does favor diversity of media ownership and diverse viewpoints on our airwaves, which we already have.
Right. And
he favors localism in radio and TV, which, by the way, we already have, and the free marketplace determines that. He's very much on record for these two new fairness doctrine-like regulations without having to come out for the fairness doctrine. Let me say this, too. I think this is very important. I've been accused of paranoia. I've been accused of manufactured controversy. I have two words for manufactured controversy: global warming. And I think those are serious words to take into consideration, but you bet I'm paranoid about speech. Absolutely I am. There's nothing better to be paranoid about than free speech in America. It's our most important right. I wouldn't be as paranoid if House Speaker Nancy Pelosi would allow a vote on the Broadcaster Freedom Act, which would forever ban the fairness doctrine. But she has not permitted a vote on that for 2 years. And she is on record, quoted as saying, our caucus, the interest of our caucus is in the reverse. Nancy Pelosi stands for regulation of speech on the airwaves. And I think that America should turn the heat up on her office, call her out on this, because if you're not for free speech, and she's clearly not by resisting this Broadcaster Freedom Act, which is sponsored by Congressman Mike Pence and Greg Walden, two former broadcasters who understand what's at stake here. If you're not for that, then I don't know how she can look herself in the mirror.
Are there Republican members of Congress who are speaking out forcefully on this? And do we have legislation either in the hopper or being considered here for and against what we're talking about?
Well, yes. The two gentlemen I just mentioned are the chief spokesmen for the conservative talk radio side, and that's Congressman Pence and Walden. They understand what's at stake here. And there are others. Is there regulations or legislation that would prevent it? Yes, they would queue up legislation, but it would be shot down by the Democrat-controlled majority in both houses, no question. The only thing that we really have here, we don't even have a filibuster. We won't have a filibuster in this matter. The only thing that we have is a court system. And the court system is queued up, and there are many legal centers queued up, ready to go. if we get back to regulation of speech. One is the Thomas More Law Center in Detroit. And they're representing Michael Savage at this point on the UK controversy, where he cannot travel to the UK because he's too hateful in his speech. By the way, he's never advocated violence.
That's right.
And
That's right.
And yes, he is bombastic, and many of us say, oh, tone it down, Michael, a little bit, but he's got free speech rights.
That's right. Let me ask you, the general listening public, what should their ears be tuned to when they start seeing this kind of movement? Are there radio stations who are already anticipating that this might come down the pike pretty soon? And you agree that it's going to happen, what, within the year or year and a half, say? Because the Democrats realize they don't have that much time here, right?
Well, I think certainly by that time frame, yes. I think maybe even sooner, because the FCC is minus several commissioners right now that Obama must replace. But it will soon have a 3-2 Democrat majority on the FCC. And when it does, and I expect that in the next at least 2 months, maybe maybe more, but I think in that time frame,
that's soon.
That you will start to see at that point movements toward redefining the public interest obligation. And the new chairman will be Julius Genachowski, an old school chum, Harvard school chum, I believe, of President Obama.
Right.
He led the digital effort for Obama's election campaign, very successful in what he did because he helped garner the youthful vote, the young vote. This man absolutely is in the mold of diversity of ownership, diversity of opinion and viewpoint, and localism, no question about it. And so those will be the two efforts led through the FCC. So I think it's right around the corner.
And will this be a creeping kind of thing, or will this be instant? And do you see radio stations already starting to build in localism or put on liberal hosts in anticipation?
No, I don't see the putting on of liberal hosts, so to speak. But there is one group, which is the largest radio company in America, Clear Channel Communications, which is trying to get out in front of this a bit by establishing programming advisory boards, which the FCC clearly wants to get done through their localism mandates. And they want to be there doing it themselves rather than having government regulate it. And to me, programming advisory boards are a very scary thing in America. It's clearly...
Again, Orwellian, Brian.
It's very Orwellian. I read a 98-page rulemaking report from the FCC, which is issued January 24th of 2008. And in it, I counted at least 8 references to establishing programming or community advisory boards for stations. And they leave language very, very gray and nebulous. They say, should these members be appointed, or should they be elected even, in one sentence? And then they state that stations that already have a formal advisory board would be exempt from this. Well, just by stating would be exempt means they're going to mandate it for anybody who doesn't do this right away. The free marketplace dictates what is popular and what is not. We already have our board of advisors as radio talk show hosts. They're your listeners. That's right. They rate you through our Arbitron services, and if your ratings are bad, you're gone. That's just the way it is. And to establish a board of advisors, at the very least, is fear looking over the shoulder of a broadcaster for fear of what he may say, what you may say. At the very worst, it could be censorship because of who's on that board. Who appoints those members? Does the radio station or does the government? And
there's potential conflicts of interest all over the place here. Let's try to get proactive here in our remaining minutes. What can any of us do to stop this attempt of putting the First Amendment into a vise? And let's begin with radio management. What can they do?
Well, radio management needs to stand up for the First Amendment, number one. They need to talk about the First Amendment rights that we as Americans have. That's what I did. It finally got to me, and I said, listen, I have to say something about this. I'm in a position right now where I can say something about this. I have no conflict of interest whatsoever, and I can speak out loudly. We as Americans have to realize this should not be a fight of conservatives against liberals. It should be a fight by conservatives and liberals against anybody who favors regulation of speech in America. And I would hope that, number one, America would would realize that, not allow it to happen under their noses, because this administration acts quickly in a stealth manner in which it can happen and we don't even know it's happened, and until it's too late. And we have to be very aware of this. The second thing is there are many groups out there right now which are leading the cause to protect our speech rights on the airwaves. One is the Media Research Center. The Media Research Center, I have a lot of faith in. Brent Bozell does a fabulous job on our behalf, has a petition drive which you can easily sign online. They are going to deliver, or have delivered at this point, at least 400,000 signatures online. There are others. There's unfairair.org, which is a great organization to resist any kind of re-regulation of speech on the radio. And there are others. Don'tTouchMyDial.com, I believe it is.